So I'm here representing the Barley and Oat team at Northam. So that's Hamid, Hamad, Bronte, Georgie, who's still on maternity leave, Kylie and Kate, and we've got Michelle working for us at the Northam office. So the barley variety and oat variety work is only a small part of the work that we're doing within DPIRD. So this year we've planted nearly 2,500 research plots. We've got 3,000 hill plots out there, and we've taken, as this diagram shows, about 3,500 hand cuts from our research plots. So we're doing a lot of the physiology of barley and oat work. And as Kirsty's mentioned, we have a major part of the processed oat program looking at yield gain in oats going forward and better healthy quality of our oats. So what I'm going to do today is talk a bit about some of the research that's out there, but this document here, I put a lot of time into this document. So the barley section and the oat section's got a lot of my time after hours getting this thing written. So I hope you all are reading it from page to page, because there's a lot of love and effort going into writing this thing. So if you're not, I'll be devastated. So let's get on to the presentation. Okay, so we'll firstly talk about barley, right? So let's just picture where we're at. We're actually seeing an increase in the amount of area sown to feed-only varieties. So in the peak, 9 in every 10 hectares were sown to a variety that was deliverable into a receivable stack at that particular time. We fast forward to 2022, and we've just under 8 in every 10 hectares now is sown to a variety that's receivable as malt. If we just pick up a picture in comparison between the peak in 2015 and the current year, we can look at the change in what growers are doing is different across the state, okay? So we've got the 4 port zones, and we've got the importance of barley across those 4 port zones. So Kwinana is 44% of the barley area based on the CBH data from 2011 to 2022, so that 12-year period. And we're averaging 1.4 million hectares in the CBH data. So what you can see is that, in the 3 main port zones, Kwinana, Albany and Esperance, in 2015, 9 in every 10 hectares, or basically 19 in every 20 hectares, was sown to a variety that could be received as malt. In the 2022 season, we see that the biggest change has been in the Esperance port zone, where 3 of those 10 hectares is now being converted to a feed variety. And there are obviously a number of reasons for that. Obviously the change in global markets and the shortening of the premium over feed has been a major driver of that. But obviously this year we've got premiums out, and I'll discuss this in a minute, of $100 a tonne for malt barley. And obviously they're not necessarily sustainable going forward, but there may be a rebounce back into malt-only varieties next year. The other thing that's also happening is that we had our first Clearfield varieties introduced in 2011. Now, Clearfield varieties have been growing at 6% per annum since then. So now, 2 in every 3 hectares sown is to a Clearfield variety. We've got a couple more Clearfields coming out. So we've got Xena and IGB 22102T. And if they replace Planet and some of the feed barleys out there, we could get to 80% of their area or more sown to a barley variety with the Clearfield technology. The thing is this growth sustainable? And is it the right thing for us to do in terms of having so much of one product utilised on our farming systems? And obviously this is where an opportunity is, from a consultant's point of view, is does the AGT coaxium technology offer growers or farming systems anything that can give us diversity in the system that we need? Okay, so what are we growing? 50% of the area is Spartacus in 2021, followed by Planet and then Rosalind. This year, we've had some major changes. So we saw Beast, Commodus and Maximus rise in terms of production areas. So now Maximus is the number 1 malt variety, or number 1 variety grown in the state, pipping Spartacus. So going from 4% to 30-odd% of the crop in one season. And Beast and Commodus are now 2% of the planted area. So we have seen a structural change in the type of varieties that are in the system. And we've got a lot of new varieties out there, okay? So these are some of the new barley varieties. So barley growers in WA are blessed with a lot of choice, but also means that it's now difficult as to what to recommend, because each farming system will have a different need. Okay, so this comes back to this old chestnut as, we've had a swing towards feed barley, and is that the right way to go, and what are the opportunities for feed-only varieties? This is the economics of really when do you grow a feed versus the malt barley price. So I've just given you a range of malt barley premiums and a range of feed barley prices, and I've given you two scenarios, and I said, okay, I've got a variety, the premium on the market for that variety is $50 a tonne. 50% or 60% of that variety actually was receivable as malt, so my realised premium is $30, and it's cost me $10 a tonne extra to grow that variety or deliver it to the system. So my realised premium is $20. And another scenario is, okay, it's a $100 premium, it's 50% of my crop's gone malt, and my realised premium at the end of the day is $40. So if in the first scenario, a feed barley has got to out-yield a malt barley by 7%, to return the same profit. And if you get a $40 premium, then it's 13%. So if we look at, again, I'm just going to give you one scenario where we've used the whole state average, okay, and that's obviously masking a lot of the G by E that exists out there. But this table really just summarises where the situation is. So if you've got feed barley at $300 a tonne, and the premium available to you is $20 that you realise, so then you need the feed barley to yield 7% more than a malt variety. Which ones exist? So if you're growing Bass, there's lots of options to go to those feed if Bass is your preferred option. But if you're growing Maximus, no feed barley out-yields Maximus by 7% or more, and effectively can make more profit than growing Maximus in the system. So when you go home to your businesses, you need to go through this with your client group and with your relativities, looking through the table of the different relative yields in your area, and work out if it actually is viable for you to grow a feed-only option in your environment, and whether or not some of the choices that have been made are definitely the right way to go. But at $300 a tonne, it obviously means you don't need a lot of malt barley to be quite profitable in that scenario. In terms of my picks going forward in different environments, okay, we've got three different plant types out there. So we've got your true semi-dwarfs, we've got those that have got the erect leaf type, so the erectoides, and we've got your tall types. So in the lower rainfall environments, I think that you should be looking at Maximus, Rosalind, Beast, Buff, Commodus and Titan, AX. In the medium rainfall, then you've got a few more options, including Xena and potentially IGB 22102T, and Cyclops coming in. And in the higher rainfall areas, obviously there is market demand for Bass and Flinders. And then essentially got Laperouse as a potential option in that particular environment. So we do a lot of our own trials independent of the NVT system to try and evaluate varieties and work out what their strengths and weaknesses are. So this is an example of one of our trials, and I've just given you some of the varieties that we've got in the trials. I can't show you because the pointer doesn't work out, but if you look at the Commodus plots, we've got rates of nitrogen there. You can see lodging occurring in the Commodus. You look at the Beast and it's starting to lean over, and you can see some of the different structures of those different varieties, and that's what those trials are around. We're trying to bust the varieties and work out what their weaknesses are so that we're making sure that growers have relevant information to know what their strengths and weaknesses of the varieties are. So in the trial series we've been running over the last few years, we've been looking at rates of nitrogen. We've gone up to 150 units of nitrogen in the trials. This is an example of the 2021 series. 6 trials, 3 of them on lupin stubble, 3 of them on a non-legume stubble, an average response of a tonne to putting nitrogen on, but not strong variety by nitrogen interactions. In the 2022 season, there's only 3 of the trials have been harvested. We went to harvest our trial at Katanning yesterday, but it rained, so therefore we couldn't take that one off. But we had a 1.5 tonne response in our trials to date, and very strong variety by nitrogen interactions in the 2022 season. What I want to point out is that line at the top of the curve is IGB 22102T, and it stood out in our trials this year. It didn't look flash. It's like Banks. It's pretty ugly. Sorry, David. But the fact that it yielded, you'd be pretty happy about that. But what I want to do is just twist this data up a bit and just present it in a slightly different way. And so if we look at the SDW types, so the semi-dwarf types in the system, what I've done is just looked at the relative grain yield of those varieties at the different levels of nitrogen supply. And noting that in the 21 season there wasn't very strong variety by nitrogen interactions, but there were in the 2022 season. And we didn't have Bass and 102T or Xena in the 21 season. So what you can see is that the blue dotted line is Planet, and the red dotted line is Spartacus as a benchmark, and Minotaur is a new line from AGT, and it's basically tracking in both years, largely between those two varieties. But you will note that the performance of Spartacus in the 22 season got much better as we poured nitrogen on the crop, and the relative performance of Planet actually decreased. But we've got Xena, which is essentially Planet but with the IMI gene, mirrored it in our trials in terms of performance in trials. If we look at the tall types, again, lots of lines on this particular graph, but what we're seeing is that Beast, Commodus, Compass and Lapérouse are showing similar nitrogen responses in our trials in both seasons across it, and again highlighting that in the 2022 season Spartacus became a lot more competitive. Going into the medium to high rainfall type environments, I want you to look at the blue line, then the black line and then the red line. So that's the same Rectoides plant type. So the blue line, solid one is Cyclops, the black dotted line is Maximus, and then the red one is Spartacus. And in both seasons, that the order of yield at different levels of nitrogen supply is maintained between those three varieties. And that Lapérouse for us was relatively uninspiring in our particular trials, and was matching largely the performance of Maximus in our research. Yeah, so I've got a fair bit to go through. So just in terms of straw strength, one of the things that people ask us a lot about is, what are these varieties like? Well, we know that Beast, Commodus and Compass are prone to lodging, and the other varieties are less prone, but they can still lodge. So on this curve, on this particular chart here, the higher the number, the more erect the crop, the lower the number. So 0 means everything would be flat on the ground and almost unharvestable. So we've got, like in the case of Beast, at least 25% of our observations in trial plots have got plot collapse. It's pretty hard to actually do full lodging in plots because you've got the neighbouring effect, but we've got plot collapse in crops like Beast. But we've also noted that varieties like Cyclops, we've got examples where we've got crop collapse in that particular variety. In terms of IGB 2210T, we think that's got reasonable straw strength, and we've seen a lot of brackling this year, and what we've noted is that Cyclops and Maximus were the least likely to brackle of all the varieties that we've been evaluating. Okay, so I just wanted to, just in terms of top picks for 2023, from a barley point of view, is that, again, Beast for the lower rainfall environments, Buff for acid soils, Combat because of the spot form and net plots resistance, Commodus for low rainfall because they're using IMI technology, Cyclops is the new Rosalind for the medium and high rainfall environments, 22102T, if it gets released, is very promising, Maximus is an improved Spartacus, and Xena is really your Planet, but you can use the IMI tolerance in that particular variety. But again, there's much more information in this booklet that I encourage you to have a look at. Okay, so now in terms of oak variety choices, going forward, so 2021, 1 in every 2 hectares was sown to Bannister, and then we've got the rest. Fast forward to 2022, Bannister still 1 in 2 hectares, increased its dominance, and we've got the slow rise of bilby, but not a lot of change in the last 2 years of the oats. Again, grain oats, we don't have a lot of new options coming through. We've got a lot of hay options, but the grain cupboard is pretty bare from an oat point of view. So this is just really a comparison looking at, say, bilby and koalas using NVT data as the site mean yield increases. And what I want to highlight for you is the orange line is koala, and the black line is Bannister. So what you see is that under very high yielding situations, it appears that koala might be the highest yielding oat that we could have in the system. The green line and the purple line are bilby and Williams. So in NVT trials, bilby's actually matched Williams from a grain yield point of view. This is just a grain quality point of view again, where a lot of oats let themselves down. And what you're seeing in the left-hand chart is the test weight, is that koala and bilby are matching Bannister from a test weight point of view, but not the best out there, but certainly better than Williams. And from a screenings point of view, is that Koala's again matched Bannister. Bilby's doing slightly better under some scenarios, but they're definitely better than Williams. So Bilby, it's an accredited variety. It is really an alternative to Williams, but with similar quality. The problem is it's susceptible to septoria and stem rust, and it's probably the reason why it's been held back. Koala is a Bannister cross. It's not yet been evaluated for milling, and there are question marks over its beta-glucan level, but it will be released as a feed oat. So obviously those farmers who want to use it on farm use and are in those 4 tonne plus environments, then in the 2024 season, SeedNet, who are commercialising this variety, are hoping to have seed available for sale in WA, and again, it could be a good option. It is a long season variety, and it is more rounded for disease resistance than Bannister. Okay, we've got a lot of hay oats out there. Okay, so we've got Archer, which is modelled on Yulara, but different. Okay, so it has different agronomic traits, and people need to think that if they're growing Yulara for hay, then whatever they do for that is not going to be the same as they would do for Archer. Kingbale, however, is modelled on Winteroo, looks like Winteroo, smells like Winteroo, and effectively is Winteroo. So if you've grown Winteroo in the past, then Kingbale will give you exactly the same response and will lodge just like Winteroo does. It's also worth noting that Century is now fully approved for IBS use for hay, forage, seed and grain on these varieties. However, these varieties cannot be delivered to the CBH system. There's 2 other hays out there. There's Coulter, which is essentially a new hay for the low to medium rainfall environments, and it's quite a tall variety. And Wallaby, which is a variety for the medium to high rainfall environments. Now, this slide just highlights one of the trials that we've had with the hay work. What you can see is I've highlighted Wallaby and Kingbale, which hadn't been cut yet at the time that we'd been cutting the other varieties. Wallaby, very dark green colour. Kingbale, quite a light green colour. I'm not sure how it comes up on the screen behind me. You can see that we'd already cut Carolop 4 times. And one of those was our watery ripe cut, and the other 3 were 7, 14 and 21 days after it had reached panicle emergence. So we've been doing quite a lot of work with these new varieties, trying to provide some additional information which is going to help the industry with separating what hay varieties we want to go forward. You can also see some quite difference in architecture of these hay crops in the aerial photograph too. So here's some results from our trials from last year, from this year, say from the Z watery ripe cuts. Our yields went from 11 to 16 tonnes across the hay varieties in hay cuts at the Eurocoin, sown at the end of May. York, similar type of results. The key thing is that there's a 3-week difference in cutting date between the varieties that we've been evaluating. Brusher was, in our trials, was the highest yielding variety that we've evaluated this year. And the advantage of Wallaby is it's late flowering like Kingbale, but it doesn't have the same lodging loss that Kingbale has. The sowing guide has got a lot of information now about some other things about growing oat and hay and oat and grain, and again I encourage you to go and have a read of that information in the document, and it covers all of those traits in there, and again it also has a lot more information about the variety choices that are available. Now this is one of our trial sites. And I think you need to recognise that 75% of our work at the moment is on oats, and we are trying to provide more yield stability and more information for the oat industry to grow. And we are working in partnership with Intergrain in the oat space, and this is our site from York, and you can see that we've got thousands of lines on the back up here with new germplasm that's never been grown in field trials in Western Australia. In our oat yield per se stuff, again, we've got oat material that's never been grown in field plots anywhere in Australia before. So this is the first time we've been able to evaluate some of that material internationally and domestically. And then this is another one of our sites that we've got at Eurocoin, again, indicating that we're putting a significant amount of work into providing better information for oat and barley growers in Western Australia. So thank you.